When an entire galaxy is afraid of one quiet girl, it is usually the galaxy that deserves the questions. The market stretched nearly half a mile beneath the steel arches of Horizon Tradeport, one of the busiest commercial hubs along the outer shipping lanes. Cargo drones drifted overhead, carrying containers the size of small houses. Neon signs flickered through clouds of recycled steam. Merchants shouted prices in dozens of languages, while travelers pushed through the crowded walkways. Ryan Carter moved through the chaos with a maintenance toolkit hanging from one shoulder and a shipping manifest tucked beneath his arm. He had come looking for replacement parts for a damaged coolant system. Nothing more. Then he noticed the empty circle. In a market packed with thousands of people, one section stood strangely clear. Nobody lingered there. Nobody stopped to browse nearby stalls. Even children instinctively moved around it. At the center of the open space stood a metal enclosure no larger than 8 feet across. Inside sat a young alien woman. Thin restraints circled her wrists and connected to the floor. Sapphire blue skin reflected the harsh white lights overhead. Silver hair fell across her shoulders. Her violet eyes remained fixed on the ground. She looked neither angry nor frightened, just tired. Ryan slowed. A merchant standing nearby noticed immediately. "Keep walking," the man said. Ryan glanced toward him. "Why?" The merchant looked uncomfortable. "Trust me." Ryan looked back at the enclosure. The young woman never raised her head. "That is not an answer." The merchant sighed heavily. "Nobody wants her." Ryan frowned. Clearly. The crowd continued flowing around them. Workers hurried past carrying crates. Travelers checked navigation maps. Nobody paid attention to the conversation. Yet everyone seemed aware of the girl in chains. A strange contradiction. "What did she do?" Ryan asked. The merchant laughed nervously. "That is the problem. Nobody knows." Ryan studied the enclosure more carefully. A digital display hung above it. Most listings contained ownership records, species classifications, and transaction histories. This one contained only a warning: do not acquire. The message flashed repeatedly in bright red letters. "That seems dramatic. You have not heard the stories." Ryan folded his arms. "What stories?" The merchant lowered his voice. "Everyone who takes her ends up losing something." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "A business. Sometimes. A shipment. Sometimes. A spouse. One rumor says yes." The merchant pointed toward the enclosure. "Bad luck follows her." Ryan looked at the young woman again. She remained perfectly still while complete strangers discussed her life a few feet away. The entire scene felt wrong. Not because of the rumors. Because nobody seemed interested in whether the rumors were true. "What is her name?" The merchant blinked. "What? Her name?" The merchant hesitated. "I do not know." Ryan looked around the market. "Nobody knows?" "Nobody asks." The answer lingered in the air. For the first time, the young woman slowly lifted her eyes. Their gazes met briefly. Ryan expected hostility, shame, fear. Instead, he saw something far more unsettling. She looked like someone who had spent a very long time being looked at without ever being seen. Around them, thousands of people continued moving through Horizon Tradeport. Yet somehow the market felt quieter than before. Then Ryan noticed an old identification tag hanging from the restraint around her wrist. Most of the information had been deliberately scratched away. Almost all of it. Except for one symbol. A silver crest surrounded by a ring of stars. And suddenly he understood why somebody might have worked very hard to make sure nobody wanted her. Ryan could not stop looking at the silver crest. The symbol stirred a memory he could not immediately place. He had seen it years ago while repairing communications equipment aboard a government survey vessel. Not often. Not publicly. The crest belonged to an old consortium of powerful families whose influence stretched across multiple systems. Whatever this young woman was, she was not an ordinary prisoner abandoned in a marketplace. The merchant noticed where Ryan was looking and immediately became nervous. "You should not ask about that." Ryan glanced toward him. "Why?" "Because people who ask questions about her tend to regret it." Ryan folded his arms. "That sounds suspiciously convenient." The merchant looked away. Around them, the crowd continued flowing through the market. Freight drones buzzed overhead. Vendors called out prices. Yet nobody approached the enclosure. Even travelers who clearly needed a shortcut chose longer routes rather than walk beside it. Fear had become a habit. Ryan stepped closer. The young woman followed his movement carefully. Her violet eyes never left his face now. "What is your name?" he asked. The question seemed to surprise her. Several nearby merchants stopped talking. One customer openly stared. The young woman hesitated before answering. Lyra. Her voice was soft from disuse. Ryan nodded once. Nice to meet you, Lyra. Something changed in her expression. Not much. Just enough to notice. As if she could not remember the last time someone introduced themselves instead of discussing her. You should leave, she said quietly. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Why? Because they are right. She glanced toward the warning display. Bad things happen around me. The answer sounded rehearsed. Not believed. Repeated. Ryan studied her for several seconds. Do you believe that? Lyra looked away. The silence that followed was answer enough. A maintenance drone rolled past the enclosure and briefly scanned the restraint system. The display above the cage flickered. For a split second, the warning message disappeared. During that brief interruption, a different line of text flashed beneath it. Archive access restricted. Then the warning returned. Ryan saw it. So did Lyra. Neither spoke. The merchant immediately stepped between Ryan and the display. System glitch. Interesting glitch. You should really move on. Ryan ignored him. He crouched slightly until he was closer to Lyra's eye level. How long have you been here? She looked toward the crowd. Long enough. Weeks. Months. Ryan exhaled slowly. Nobody remained chained in a public market for months unless somebody wanted them seen. The realization bothered him. This was not abandonment. It was a message. The question was why. He reached into his pocket and removed a small bottle of water purchased earlier for the walk back to his ship. Without hesitation, he placed it through the opening in the enclosure. Lyra stared at it, then at him. Why? She asked. Ryan smiled faintly. Because every conversation goes better when nobody is thirsty. For the first time, a hint of confusion replaced the exhaustion in her eyes. Not fear, not suspicion, confusion, as if kindness had become stranger than cruelty. Then a new voice echoed across the marketplace from behind them. Human. Ryan turned. An older trader stood several yards away watching the enclosure. His expression looked serious. If you are asking about the girl, he said quietly, then you deserve to know why nobody else wants her. The older trader waited until several customers moved out of earshot before stepping closer. His weathered coat carried the dust of 100 worlds, and his expression suggested he had spent years regretting things he never talked about. Ryan glanced toward him. You said I deserve to know. The man nodded. Most people hear one story and stop asking questions. He looked toward Lyra. That is how this started. The marketplace continued buzzing around them. Cargo loaders rolled past. Vendors argued over prices. Somewhere nearby, music drifted from a food stall. Yet within the empty circle surrounding the enclosure, the atmosphere felt strangely isolated from the rest of the station. 3 years ago, the trader began. A research consortium brought her here. Lyra lowered her eyes. She had heard pieces of the story before, never the entire thing. They claimed she carried a rare biological condition. Ryan folded his arms. The curse. At first, nobody called it that. The trader looked uncomfortable. People only started using that word later. He pointed toward the warning display. After the accidents. Ryan frowned. What accidents? Equipment failures. Financial collapses. Lost contracts. The list sounded familiar. Exactly the sort of vague misfortunes rumors loved to collect. And all of it was blamed on her. Ryan asked. The trader nodded. The story spread quickly. Lyra remained silent. She remembered the first owner. A shipping broker who lost a major contract 6 weeks after taking custody of her. Then a mining supervisor whose equipment failed during a routine inspection. Then another. Every setback became proof. Every coincidence became evidence. Nobody ever questioned whether bad things happened before she arrived. Ryan looked toward the enclosure. Did anyone actually investigate? The trader laughed softly. Fear is cheaper than investigation. The answer hung heavily in the air. A transport horn echoed somewhere above the market. Nearby merchants began closing several stalls as evening approached. The older man glanced around before lowering his voice further. There was one thing that never made sense. Ryan immediately noticed the change in tone. What? The trader pointed toward the restraint around Lyra's wrist. Every owner eventually gave her away. That seems normal if they believe the rumors. No, the man shook his head. Not normal. Ryan waited. The trader sighed. Because every one of them lost money doing it. Ryan frowned. Explain. If she was worthless, they could have abandoned her. left her behind. Nobody would have stopped them. The trader looked directly at him. Instead, they transferred ownership legally every single time. The realization settled slowly. Ryan looked back toward the scratched identification tag hanging from Lyra's restraint, then toward the partially hidden silver crest. Worthless people were abandoned. Valuable people generated paperwork. Someone wanted records, he said quietly. The trader nodded once. Exactly. For the first time, genuine concern appeared on the older man's face. That is why you should leave this alone. Ryan smiled faintly. You are not doing a very good job convincing me. The trader rubbed his forehead. I was afraid of that. Then he reached into his coat and removed a small data chip. The surface carried the same silver crest scratched onto Lyra's identification tag. I found this months ago, he said, hidden inside one of the ownership files. Ryan stared at it. What is it? The trader looked toward Lyra before answering. I think it is the reason somebody worked very hard to make. Sure, nobody wanted her. Ryan accepted the data chip and turned it over in his hand. The silver crest reflected the harsh market lights for a brief moment before disappearing beneath his fingers. It felt surprisingly heavy for something so small. Around them, Horizon Trade Port continued its endless cycle of commerce. Merchants packed away goods. Cargo drones crossed overhead. Travelers hurried toward departing transports. Yet inside the empty circle surrounding Lyra's enclosure, everything seemed strangely still. What is on it? Ryan asked. The older trader shook his head. I never found out. You never checked? I tried. The man looked uncomfortable. The file is encrypted. Ryan glanced toward Lyra. She had not taken her eyes off the chip since it appeared. Not because she recognized it. Because she recognized the crest. The same symbol had followed her through years of transfers, rumors, and unanswered questions. Somehow it always appeared when people wanted information hidden. Ryan examined the surface carefully. Near one edge sat a tiny access port. Old design. Government grade. Expensive. Whatever data it contained, somebody had not wanted ordinary people reading it. Why give it to me? Ryan asked. The trader laughed quietly. Because I am leaving tomorrow. And because I spent months pretending I did not care. He looked toward Lyra. Turns out I am tired of pretending. The answer lingered between them. Ryan slipped the chip into his jacket pocket. The trader nodded once and disappeared back into the crowd before either could stop him. Within seconds he was gone. Just another traveler among thousands. Lyra watched the space where he had stood. You should not get involved. Ryan looked at her. That seems to be a popular opinion. I am serious. Her voice remained calm. Not defensive. Resigned. Everyone who tries to help eventually regrets it. Ryan considered that. Then he glanced around the market. Hundreds of people moved through the station every minute. Not one had stopped. Not one had questioned the warning sign. Not one had asked whether the stories were true. You know, he said quietly, I think people keep blaming you for the wrong thing. Lyra looked confused. What? Ryan pointed toward the warning display hanging above the enclosure. Everyone keeps talking about bad luck. He folded his arms. But bad luck does not leave encrypted government data lying around. For a moment, she had no response. Because part of her knew he was right. A simple curse should not require missing records, ownership transfers, and restricted archives. The thought unsettled her. A station worker approached carrying a handheld scanner. Without speaking, he performed a routine inspection of the enclosure. The device beeped several times. Then the worker frowned. Strange. Ryan immediately noticed. What? The worker looked at the display. The restraint registration just changed. Lyra froze. Changed. The worker checked the scanner again. Someone filed a transfer request. Ryan's eyes narrowed. For her. The worker nodded slowly. Less than 5 minutes ago. Silence settled across the enclosure. Ryan looked toward the crowd. Thousands of faces. Thousands of strangers. Somewhere among them, somebody had just tried to claim ownership of Lyra. The timing felt impossible to ignore. Especially after the data chip appeared. The worker checked the scanner one final time before his expression changed completely. That is odd. Ryan felt a chill run through him. What now? The worker turned the screen around. A name appeared beneath the transfer request. Not an individual. Not a company. An organization. One Ryan recognized immediately. Horizon Interstellar Genetics Division. And suddenly the rumors surrounding Lyra felt a lot less important than the people who seemed determined to keep track of her. The station worker left a few minutes later, But the name remained in Ryan's mind long after the scanner disappeared into the crowd. Horizon Interstellar Genetics Division. He knew the company. Most people working the outer shipping lanes did. They specialized in biological research, genetic preservation programs, and high-security archive projects. They were not the kind of organization that filed ownership requests for random prisoners sitting in market enclosures. The realization settled heavily over the conversation. Lyra stared at the floor of the enclosure. I told you. Ryan glanced toward her. Told me what? Bad things happen when people become interested in me. The answer sounded tired rather than dramatic. Ryan leaned against the railings surrounding the enclosure. I am starting to think people have the cause and effect backward. Lyra looked up. What? Maybe bad things do not happen because of you. He folded his arms. Maybe they happen because someone wants to control whatever they think you are. For several seconds, she said nothing. The possibility had crossed her mind before. Usually late at night. Usually right before she convinced herself it was foolish. The problem was that hope could be dangerous. Hope created expectations. Expectations created disappointment. It felt safer to believe the rumors. At least rumors never changed. The market lights shifted slightly as evening approached. Long shadows stretched across the walkways. Nearby vendors began covering merchandise and preparing for the night cycle. Yet the empty circle around Lyra remained untouched. The warning display continued flashing above her. Do not acquire. Ryan stared at it for several moments before stepping closer to the enclosure. How many owners? He asked. Lyra blinked. What? How many people have taken custody of you? She hesitated. 4. And every one of them gave you away? Lyra nodded. Ryan frowned. That is expensive. Most people do not mention that part. Most people are not mechanics. He pointed toward the warning sign. Machines fail. Contracts collapse. Businesses lose money. Then he pointed toward the enclosure. But ownership transfers cost credits. Lots of them. Lyra stared at him. Nobody had ever looked at the situation that way. The crowd saw a curse. Ryan saw paperwork. Somehow that felt more useful. He reached into his jacket pocket and removed the silver data chip. The old crest glimmered beneath the market lights. Do you recognize this? Lyra studied it carefully. Her expression changed almost immediately. Not recognition. Memory. I have seen it before. Ryan waited. Where? She closed her eyes briefly. Fragments surfaced. Hallways. Laboratories. White uniforms. Long corridors illuminated by cold blue light. I do not know. Her voice sounded distant. But it feels familiar. The answer sent a chill through Ryan. Memories did not attach themselves to random symbols. Especially not memories buried that deeply. Before he could respond, a loud notification echoed across the marketplace. Several merchants glanced toward the enclosure. The warning display above Lyra suddenly changed. The red letters vanished. New text appeared. Transfer request approved. The crowd immediately became restless. People whispered. Some hurried away. Others stopped to watch. Ryan looked toward the display, then toward Lyra. Approved by who? Lyra whispered. The answer appeared a second later. Horizon Interstellar Genetics Division. Ryan stared at the screen. Then he looked back toward the crowd. Somewhere in the marketplace, somebody already knew the request had been accepted. And for the first time since arriving, Ryan had the uncomfortable feeling that they were no longer the only people interested in finding out who Lyra really was. The marketplace changed the moment the approval notice appeared. Nothing dramatic happened. No alarms sounded. No security teams arrived. Yet the atmosphere shifted in a way Ryan could feel immediately. People began paying attention. Not to the warning display. To Lyra. Merchants who had ignored her for months suddenly glanced toward the enclosure whenever they thought nobody was watching. Travelers slowed down as they passed. Even the vendor who had spent the afternoon telling Ryan to leave looked visibly nervous. Information had moved through the station faster than any official announcement. Someone important wanted Lyra. That fact alone made her valuable. Ryan hated how predictable that felt. He looked toward the display still flashing above the enclosure. Transfer request approved. Horizon Interstellar Genetics Division. The words repeated every few seconds. Can they do that? He asked. Lyra stared at the screen. Usually. Most ownership transfers happen automatically if nobody objects. Ryan folded his arms. And if someone does object? Lyra looked away. Nobody. Ever has. The answer landed harder than she intended. Because it was true. Every transfer, every relocation, every decision. People signed forms and moved her somewhere else. Nobody asked what she wanted. The realization seemed to bother Ryan as much as it bothered her. He walked toward the information terminal attached to the enclosure. Several menu options appeared. Ownership history, medical records, transfer requests. Most were locked behind administrative permissions. One section remained accessible. Current valuation. Ryan selected it. The screen loaded instantly. Then he frowned. That is strange. Lyra immediately looked up. What? Ryan pointed toward the number displayed on the screen. It was far higher than either expected. Not slightly higher. Ridiculously higher. Nobody wants you, he said slowly. Yet somebody values you at more than a cargo transport ship. The contradiction settled heavily between them. Lyra stared at the number. Her previous owners had always insisted she was worthless, defective, unwanted. Yet the official valuation told a completely different story. Ryan scrolled further. A list of recent inquiries appeared beneath it. Several corporate entities, 2 government agencies, 1 private archive foundation. All had requested access within the last year. None had succeeded. People have been looking for you. Lyra shook her head. That makes no sense. I agree. Ryan glanced toward the silver data chip resting in his pocket. The pieces were beginning to form a pattern. Missing records, hidden archives, corporate interest, ownership transfers. None of it matched the story everyone kept repeating. A curse was supposed to make people avoid you. Somebody had gone through extraordinary effort to keep track of Lyra. The difference mattered. A soft electronic chime interrupted his thoughts. The transfer request updated. New information appeared beneath the approval notice. Arrival scheduled, 27 minutes. Ryan's eyes narrowed. They are coming here. Lyra looked toward the crowd instinctively. Fear flickered across her face for the first time that day. Not because she expected harm, because she expected answers. Answers could change everything. The marketplace lights dimmed slightly as evening settled across Horizon Tradeport. Long shadows stretched between cargo stalls. Somewhere overhead, a freight shuttle departed the station. Ryan looked at the enclosure, then at the restraints attached to Lyra's wrists, then back at the display. How much would it cost? He asked quietly. Lyra blinked. What? Ryan never took his eyes off the valuation screen. To buy the transfer rights before they arrive. Lyra stared at him as if she had misheard the question. Around them, Horizon Tradeport continued drifting toward its evening cycle. Vendors lowered security shutters. Cargo haulers departed loading zones. Thousands of people moved through the market, completely unaware that 27 minutes remained before someone came to collect the girl everyone claimed to fear. You cannot be serious, Lyra said quietly. Ryan never looked away from the valuation display. That depends. On what? How expensive they made you. The answer was so matter-of-fact that she almost laughed. Almost. The marketplace had spent years treating her like a disaster waiting to happen. Ryan was discussing the situation as though he were evaluating replacement engine parts. Somehow that felt comforting. He scrolled through the transfer screen until the purchase authorization appeared. The number displayed beneath it made him whistle softly. That is a lot of credits. Lyra folded her arms. I told you. You also told me nobody wanted you. He pointed toward the screen. Somebody forgot to tell the accounting department. The contradiction hung between them. Worthless people did not receive valuations like this. Worthless people did not attract corporate retrieval teams. Worthless people did not generate restricted archives and encrypted data chips. The deeper Ryan looked, the less the official story made sense. A merchant from a nearby stall approached cautiously. You are not actually considering it, are you? Ryan glanced up. Considering what? Buying the transfer rights. The merchant looked genuinely alarmed. Those people are powerful. Ryan shrugged. That is not really an answer. The merchant lowered his voice. Everyone who gets involved ends up regretting it. Ryan looked toward Lyra. You know, people keep saying that. Maybe because it is true, Lyra replied. The words sounded automatic. Learned. Like something she had repeated for years. Ryan studied her expression. Then he looked toward the silver crest scratched into her restraint. Do you remember anything before all this? She hesitated. Not much. Nothing. Lyra closed her eyes briefly. Fragments surfaced. Bright corridors. White uniforms. Someone calling her by a longer name. A laboratory window overlooking a distant ocean. Then the images vanished again. Just pieces. Ryan nodded slowly. The missing memories bothered him almost as much as the missing records. Before he could ask another question, the data chip in his pocket suddenly vibrated. The movement surprised both of them. Ryan removed it immediately. A faint blue light pulsed beneath the silver crest. That did not happen before. Lyra leaned forward. The chip continued glowing. Nearby electronics reacted instantly. The warning display above the enclosure flickered. Several menu options appeared where none existed before. Hidden archive access available. Ryan stared at the screen. Well, what? Lyra asked. I think we just found the reason somebody wanted that chip hidden. He inserted it into the market terminal. The system processed for several seconds. Then a file appeared. One file. No title. No description. Just a date. 7 years earlier. Ryan opened it. The screen filled with an official photograph. A younger Lyra stood beside several scientists wearing research uniforms. She was smiling. Not the guarded expression she wore now. A real smile. Beneath the image sat a single line of text. Subject designated priority preservation candidate. Ryan felt a chill run through him. Lyra stared at the words without speaking. Because for the first time since arriving at the market, there was proof. Proof that somebody had not spent years trying to get rid of her. Somebody had spent years trying to hide what she actually was. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The marketplace noise seemed distant now, reduced to a dull hum. Beyond the enclosure, Lyra stared at the photograph displayed on the terminal. The young woman smiling beside the scientists looked familiar and foreign at the same time. She recognized her own face. She did not recognize the happiness. Ryan watched her carefully. Do you remember any of it? Lyra shook her head slowly. No. The answer hurt more than she expected. Because now there was proof that something had been taken from her. Not money. Not status. Memory. Identity. A life she could no longer reach. Ryan scrolled through the archive file. Additional documents appeared beneath the photograph. Research notes. Security authorizations. Biological assessments. Most were heavily encrypted. One summary page remained accessible. He opened it immediately. The marketplace terminal flickered under the strain. Then the report appeared. Designation, priority preservation candidate. Reason, unique adaptive genetic architecture. Recommended action, protective custody, and continued monitoring. Ryan read the final line twice. Then a third time. Nowhere in the report did the word curse appear. Not once. Lyra noticed his expression. What does it say? Ryan turned the screen toward her. It says somebody lied. The answer settled heavily between them. Nearby merchants pretended not to watch. Travelers slowed down. The atmosphere around the enclosure had changed completely. Earlier people avoided Lyra because they believed she was dangerous. Now curiosity had begun replacing fear. That made Ryan uneasy. Fear ignored people. Curiosity collected them. A sudden notification appeared on the terminal. Retrieval team arrival, 8 minutes. Horizon Interstellar Genetics Division. The countdown continued ticking in the corner of the screen. Lyra looked toward the display. They are almost here. Ryan nodded. Looks that way. What are you going to do? Ryan considered the question. Then he glanced toward the transfer purchase option still available on the terminal. The number beside it remained painfully high. More credits than he should reasonably spend. More credits than any sensible cargo engineer would risk. Yet the more he learned, the less sensible the situation felt. Before he could answer, the archive file updated automatically. A second document unlocked itself. This one contained an internal communication thread between senior researchers. Most names had been redacted. One sentence remained visible. Subject relocation approved after corporate acquisition. Public explanation recommended to discourage inquiries. Ryan felt a chill run through him. Corporate acquisition. Lyra looked confused. What does that mean? It means somebody bought the project. The words sounded ugly the moment he said them. Because they explained far too much. Missing records. Ownership transfers. Manufactured rumors. If enough people believed Lyra brought disaster, nobody would ask why she kept disappearing. Nobody would investigate where she came from. Nobody would look deeper. The perfect cover story. Lyra lowered her eyes. For years she had blamed herself for the loneliness, the isolation, the fear. Now the possibility emerged that none of it had been her fault. The realization felt almost impossible to accept. A shadow passed across the marketplace entrance. Several uniformed individuals had just entered the station. They moved with purpose. Not rushing. Not searching. They already knew exactly where they were going. Ryan saw them first. Then Lyra followed his gaze. The countdown in the corner of the screen still showed 8 minutes. Yet the retrieval team had arrived early. One of the approaching officials raised a tablet and compared it to the enclosure identification number. Then he looked directly at Lyra. And for the first time since Ryan found her in chains, she realized the people coming for her were not afraid of her at all. The retrieval team stopped several feet from the enclosure. Four officials in gray uniforms stood quietly beneath the market lights while thousands of people continued moving around them. No dramatic confrontation followed. No threats. No demands. They did not look frightened of Lyra. They looked relieved. That realization unsettled her more than fear ever had. The lead representative lowered his tablet and studied the restraint attached to her wrist. "Identification confirmed," he said softly. "Thank the stars." Ryan immediately noticed the reaction. The man sounded like someone who had spent years searching for a missing person, not recovering dangerous property. "You know her?" Ryan asked. The official looked toward him. "Of course." Then he looked back at Lyra. "We have been trying to find her for almost 6 years." The marketplace suddenly felt very quiet. Lyra stared at him. "What?" The representative exchanged a glance with one of his colleagues before answering. "The public story claimed your records were destroyed during a relocation accident." Ryan folded his arms. "And you believe that?" At first, the official sighed. Then too many files disappeared. He glanced toward the archive terminal still displaying the recovered records. "Now we know why." Several merchants nearby had stopped pretending not to listen. The rumors that once surrounded Lyra suddenly seemed fragile. Small. Incomplete. The representative stepped closer to the enclosure. "Miss Solis." Lyra froze. Not because of the title. Because of the name. Miss Solis. The word struck something deep within her memory. Not Lyra. Not the label people used after the rumors began. Solis. Images flashed through her mind. White laboratories. Ocean research facilities. Scientists smiling for photographs. Her own signature on documents she could no longer remember writing. The memory vanished almost immediately. Yet this time it left something behind. Recognition. Ryan noticed the change in her expression. "You remember that name?" Lyra nodded slowly. "I think so." The representative smiled gently. "Good." He removed a small data crystal from his pocket and handed it through the enclosure. "These are your original records." Lyra stared at the crystal. For years she had been treated as a warning sign. A burden. A problem. Now someone was handing her proof that another life once existed. The irony felt almost impossible to describe. Ryan looked toward the restraint around her wrist, then toward the terminal displaying the approved transfer request. "So what happens now?" The representative considered the question carefully. Then he looked directly at Lyra. "That depends entirely on her." The answer surprised everyone, including Lyra. "Me?" The official nodded. "The transfer request has been canceled." He tapped his tablet. The display above the enclosure immediately changed. Ownership status removed. Restriction order revoked. Archive classification restored. The warning message disappeared forever. For several seconds nobody spoke. The market continued around them. Cargo drones crossed overhead. Vendors packed away merchandise. Ordinary life moved forward. Yet inside the enclosure, everything had changed. Ryan reached toward the restraint release. This time nobody stopped him. A soft click echoed through the evening air. The chain fell away. Lyra looked down at her freed wrist, then toward the stars visible through the station's glass ceiling. The last chain had never been the metal. It had been the story people told about her. The story she eventually believed herself. Ryan smiled faintly. "What are you going to do now?" Lyra looked at the data crystal in one hand and the open market beyond the enclosure in the other. Then she took a slow breath. For the first time in years, nobody had already decided the answer. And as she stepped forward into the crowd, she realized something wonderful. The future was no longer something happening to her. It was finally something she could choose.